I swear, I've never felt my heart stop like that before. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at my coffee, thinking about nothing and everything at once, when I heard a noise outside my door. It wasn't just a noise. It was a scream that didn't sound human. For a moment, I froze, my mug halfway to my lips. Then it came again, louder, desperate. I got up so fast my chair fell backward and clattered onto the wooden floor. I rushed to the door and yanked it open. And there she was, a lynx, a full-grown lynx, with eyes that burned golden even in the pale morning light. Her mouth was open in a cry so raw and deep it made my bones shake. I saw her chest heaving, her fur bristling, her ears pinned flat back against her head. She wasn't running away. She wasn't hiding. She was standing there on my porch, screaming at me. And then I saw why. At her feet, curled in a ball of damp fur and twitching ears, was a tiny lynx cub. It wasn't moving. Its breathing was so shallow I couldn't even see its chest rise. The mother nudged it with her nose and cried out again, a sound that ripped through the cool morning air like a blade. I felt something inside me crack open. For a moment, I couldn't move. I just stood there in my doorway, staring down at them. Her eyes locked with mine. She didn't growl or bare her teeth. She just cried. I didn't know what to do. My mind screamed at me to shut the door, to run back inside, to call animal control, to do anything except stand there like an idiot with my mouth open. But my body wouldn't listen. Instead, my knees went weak, and I crouched down slowly. I didn't even think about how dangerous she was. I didn't care. All I saw was a mother in pain, begging for help she didn't understand, from a creature she didn't trust, because there was no other choice left. I whispered, "What happened to your baby?" She didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. Her chest kept rising and falling in ragged, panicked breaths. The cub's tiny paw twitched, and then it went still again. My hands were shaking so badly I pressed them against my knees to stop them. In my head, I saw flashes I thought I had buried forever. My son, Ethan, lying in that hospital bed. Tubes everywhere. Machines beeping. His chest rising and falling so shallow it made me sick to look at it. I remembered sitting there, hour after hour, praying to a God I wasn't sure was even listening anymore. I remembered how it felt when his little hand slipped out of mine for the last time. And now here I was, staring at this dying baby lynx on my porch, with its mother crying the same way I had cried back then, like the world had ended. I swallowed hard. My voice was trembling. I said, "I don't know what you want me to do." But she just looked at me, with those eyes that were wide and wet and desperate. And somehow, I knew exactly what she wanted. She wanted me to save her baby. She wanted me to do what she couldn't. I reached out my hand, and for a second she tensed, her fur bristling even more, her claws scraping against the porch boards. But she didn't attack. She just watched me. I gently touched the cub's side. Its fur was cold, too cold. I felt panic claw up my throat. I glanced at the mother. Her ears twitched forward, waiting, hoping, pleading. I took a deep breath and scooped the cub into my hands. Its head lolled to the side, limp and lifeless. I felt tears sting my eyes. I stood up slowly, holding the cub against my chest. The mother backed away half a step, but she didn't run. She just sat there, staring at me, her mouth open in that silent scream. And in that moment, standing there on my porch with a dying lynx cub in my arms, I knew there was no way I could walk back inside and pretend this wasn't happening, because I had already lost one child. I wasn't going to let this one die too. I walked back into the house with the cub pressed tight against my chest. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped him twice. I could feel his ribs under his fur, so small and fragile it made my heart twist. His breathing was shallow and uneven, each tiny gasp sounding like it might be his last. Behind me, I heard her. The mother lynx. She didn't scream this time. She let out a low, desperate moan that rose and fell like she was pleading with me. I turned and looked back through the screen door. She was standing there on the porch, her ears pinned back, her golden eyes wide with fear and something else. Hope, maybe, or terror that she'd just handed her baby over to a creature that didn't care. I whispered, "I'm gonna help him. I promise." I carried him into the living room and laid him down on an old folded blanket near the wood stove. He didn't move. His body felt like it was made of paper. I grabbed a towel and wrapped him up as gently as I could, trying to warm him up. His nose was dry and cold. His tiny paws were limp. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and started calling every vet in the county, one after another, voicemail after voicemail. It was still early, just after 6 in the morning, and no one was answering. I left messages, trying to keep my voice steady. Yeah, this is Thomas Miller out on Ridge Road. I've got an emergency with a wild lynx cub. He's freezing and barely breathing. I need someone to call me back as soon as possible. I hung up and called the next number. And the next. And the next. My eyes kept flicking over to the little bundle on the blanket. His chest rose, fell, then nothing, then a tiny gasp. Come on, little guy, stay with me. Please. Outside, I heard claws scratching softly at the screen door. I turned and saw her sitting there, just inches away, staring in through the mesh. Her ears were forward now, her mouth hanging open in shallow pants. Her tail flicked side to side. She could rip through that screen in one swipe if she wanted to. But she didn't move. She just watched. I felt tears burning at the corners of my eyes. I wiped them away with the back of my wrist and tried to focus. Think, Tom. Think. I went to the bathroom and grabbed a syringe from an old first aid kit. I filled a mug with warm water, tested it against my wrist to make sure it wasn't too hot, then drew it up into the syringe. I crouched beside the cub and slipped the tip between his lips, pressing gently to get a few drops into his mouth. He didn't swallow at first. His tiny tongue just lolled to the side. I massaged his throat lightly with my finger, praying he wouldn't choke. After a second, he swallowed, a tiny reflex that made my chest tighten so hard I thought I might black out. Good boy. Come on. Just a little more. I gave him a few more drops, then wrapped the towel tighter around him and held him against my chest again. His fur was starting to warm, but his body was still limp. I could feel his heartbeat, fluttering so fast and weak it barely felt real. I looked back at the door. She was still there, unmoving, her eyes locked onto me and her cub. Her breaths came in short, broken pants, fogging up the screen. I remembered sitting beside Ethan's hospital bed. His skin had felt the same way, too cold, too pale. I remembered begging the nurses for more blankets, for another heater, for anything to warm him up. I remembered the way his little chest rose and fell, slower and slower, until the rise never came again. I shook my head hard, trying to push the memory away. Not now. Not now. I called another vet. Another voicemail. My voice cracked this time. Please, I'm begging you, call me back. He's dying. I ended the call and threw the phone onto the couch. I held the cub tighter, rocking back and forth on my knees like I used to do when Ethan was a baby. I could feel my tears falling onto his fur, soaking into the towel. Outside, the mother lynx let out a sound so soft and broken it barely reached my ears. I turned my head and saw her pressed against the screen, her nose almost touching it, her eyes pleading with me. I whispered, I know how it feels. And in that moment, I wasn't in my living room anymore. I was back in that hospital, holding my son's cold little hand, wishing I could give him my own warmth, my own life, anything just to keep him here a little longer. I blinked hard and looked down at the cub. His chest rose, fell, rose again, a little stronger this time. That's it. Come on. Stay with me. Behind me, the sun was rising, filling the room with pale golden light. And for the first time in years, I felt like maybe there was still something in this world worth saving. I sat there on the floor for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes, cradling that tiny bundle of fur in my hands. His breathing was still shallow and ragged, but at least it was there. Each time his chest rose and fell, it gave me a flicker of hope. Each pause between breaths sent a jolt of panic through my veins. I grabbed another towel from the bathroom and put it in the dryer for a minute to warm it up. When I wrapped him in it, he flinched slightly at the heat, a tiny movement that made my heart leap. I pressed my forehead against his and whispered, That's it, little guy. Stay with me. Outside, I heard her again. The mother lynx. This time it wasn't a scream or a moan. It was a deep, rumbling growl that sent a shiver down my spine. I turned my head slowly and saw her silhouette through the thin curtains, pacing back and forth on the porch, her tail flicking in agitation. She was so close. If she wanted to break down the door, I knew she could. I tried not to think about that. I focused on the cub. I unwrapped the towel and checked him over as best I could. His fur was matted with mud and a little blood near his back leg. I swallowed hard. Gently, I ran my fingers along his leg, feeling for breaks. He whimpered softly but didn't pull away. That was good? Bad? I didn't know. I grabbed the syringe again and drew up more warm water. This time, I added a pinch of sugar and salt, hoping it might give him a little energy. I slipped the tip into his mouth and dripped it in slowly. He swallowed again, weak but responsive. I felt tears sting my eyes. Outside, the growl turned into a sharp yowl. I looked up and saw her standing at the window, her eyes glowing with something between rage and terror. Her ears were pinned back, and I could see the muscles in her shoulders twitching with every breath. She opened her mouth and let out a cry so raw and desperate it made my chest ache. I whispered, "I'm trying. I swear I'm trying." She didn't understand, of course. All she saw was a man touching her dying baby. To her, I was a threat, but she hadn't attacked yet. Some part of her knew she had no other choice. I turned back to the cub and stroked his tiny head with my thumb. His ears twitched under my touch. His whole body trembled in small, jerky spasms. I didn't know if it was shock, pain, or maybe his body fighting to come back to life. I didn't care. At least he was moving. "Come on, buddy. Fight. Please, fight." I rocked back on my heels, staring at him, and the memories came flooding back again. Ethan, in his hospital bed, his skin pale and cold. I remembered the way his little chest would rise, then pause, then rise again, each time a little slower. I remembered the way his fingers curled around mine, even when he was too weak to keep them there. I felt my throat close up. Tears blurred my vision until I couldn't see the cub anymore, just a small shape in my hands, fragile and slipping away. I pressed him against my chest and let the sobs come, silent and shaking, tears falling into his fur. Outside, the lynx let out another cry. This one was softer, almost broken, like she was giving up. I turned and saw her crouched down now, her head low, her eyes staring up at me through the window. There was no anger there anymore, just grief. I wiped my face on my sleeve and forced myself to breathe. I had to stay calm. I had to. I laid the cub back down on the blanket and rubbed his sides gently, trying to stimulate his muscles. His paws twitched and his tail flicked once. I almost laughed with relief. "That's it. Come on, little warrior." I checked his back leg again. There was a deep cut near his thigh, crusted with dried blood and dirt. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the first aid kit. I didn't have anything made for wild animals, but I found an antiseptic wipe and cleaned the wound as gently as I could. He whimpered again, louder this time, his tiny mouth opening in a silent cry. "Good. You're feeling that. That means you're still here." I wrapped his leg loosely with gauze and sat back, breathing hard. My hands were shaking so badly I had to press them against my knees again. Outside, the mother lynx watched every move I made. She let out a low, vibrating growl, but she didn't move from her spot by the window. I met her gaze and whispered, "I'm not going to let him die." But inside, I wasn't sure if I was telling her or begging God to finally hear me. The cub's breathing started to even out. Each tiny rise and fall of his chest felt steadier, less desperate. I sat there on the floor, staring down at him, feeling my own chest rise and fall with his. It was like I couldn't breathe unless he did. Outside, the mother lynx had stopped growling. She sat by the window, her head low, her ears pricked forward, watching, waiting. I didn't know what she was thinking, if she could even think like we do. But there was something in her eyes that felt human, like she understood this fight wasn't over yet. I checked the cub's leg again. The bleeding had stopped, but the wound looked angry and swollen. Infection. I knew what that meant. Without antibiotics, it wouldn't matter how warm I kept him or how much water I got into him. He would die from the inside out. I looked around the living room, like maybe an answer would be hiding between the couch cushions or under the rug. My hands were trembling. I grabbed my phone and searched for emergency animal antibiotics, but everything was prescription only. No vet had called me back yet. My voicemails were probably still sitting there, unheard, while this tiny life slipped away in my hands. I clenched my jaw and stood up, scooping him into the towel again. His body felt a little warmer now, his paws curling slightly against my chest. It gave me just enough hope to move. I turned to the window. The mother lynx was still there, eyes locked on me. I whispered, "I need to go. I'll be back. Don't go anywhere." She blinked once, slow and heavy, like she was too exhausted to do anything else. I grabbed my truck keys from the hook by the door and slipped the cub into an old cardboard box lined with another towel. He whimpered when I set him down, his ears flicking weakly. I kissed the top of his head and said, "Hold on, little warrior." Outside, The morning was bright and cold. The lynx didn't move from her spot on the porch as I stepped past her. Her eyes followed me to the truck. I could feel her gaze burning between my shoulder blades as I climbed in and started the engine. The drive into town felt like it took years. Every bump in the road made the box on the seat beside me shift, and each time, my heart stopped until I heard his tiny breathing again. The whole time, my mind was a storm of memories. Driving Ethan to the hospital that last time. His little body strapped into the back seat, too weak to hold his head up. The way he stared out the window at the trees going by, his eyes glazed over with fever. I remembered looking at him in the rearview mirror and thinking, this is it. This is the last time. My hands tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. I blinked hard, forcing the tears back. Not now. Not while I was driving. I pulled into the pharmacy parking lot and jumped out, grabbing the box with the cub. Inside, the pharmacist looked up at me with wide eyes. "Sir, is that a—" I cut him off, my voice shaking. "He needs antibiotics. Broad spectrum. Anything. Please." He stammered something about prescriptions, about vets, about laws, but I slammed my hand down on the counter so hard the box rattled. "He will die? I don't care what it costs. Please." The pharmacist swallowed hard, glanced around the empty store, then nodded once. He disappeared into the back room. I stood there, shaking so badly I thought my legs might give out. The cub let out a tiny cry from inside the box. It was the first sound he'd made that didn't sound like death. It was weak, but it was life. The pharmacist came back with a small bottle and a syringe. He slid it across the counter without meeting my eyes. I didn't ask questions. I shoved some bills into his hand, grabbed the meds, and ran back to the truck. On the drive home, the memories came back stronger. Ethan in the hospital bed, tubes everywhere, machines beeping. Me holding his hand and begging him not to go. Telling him stories about superheroes and brave warriors. Anything to keep him there with me a little longer. I pulled into my driveway and killed the engine. The lynx was still there, sitting on the porch exactly where I'd left her. When she saw me, she stood up, her tail flicking once. I climbed out with the box and whispered, "I got it. I got something that might help." She didn't move as I walked past her. Her eyes followed me into the house. Inside, I set the box down and drew up a tiny dose of the antibiotic. My hands were trembling so badly I had to steady them against my knee. I pinched the loose skin at the back of his neck and slipped the needle in. He whimpered, a weak little protest, and I felt myself smile through the tears. "That's it, little guy. You keep fighting." Outside, the lynx let out a soft, rumbling purr that vibrated through the glass. I turned and saw her pressed against the window, her golden eyes locked on her baby. And for the first time in years, I felt like maybe I wasn't alone in this fight. I sat beside him for hours, watching every tiny movement he made. The antibiotics must have started working because his breathing grew stronger, more even. His ears twitched every so often, and his paws flexed against the towel. Outside, the mother lynx never moved from her spot by the window. She just sat there, staring in at us with eyes so full of something I couldn't name. Fear, hope, grief, love, all of it at once. I reached out and stroked the cub's head with one finger. His fur was soft now, warm from the blankets and my own body heat. He turned his head slightly, pressing his nose into my palm. The little movement made my chest tighten with something so sharp it almost hurt. Relief, joy, pain. I whispered, "You're gonna make it, little warrior. You're gonna make it." His breathing hitched, then steadied again. I let out a shaky laugh and wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. Outside, the sun was already climbing high, filling the living room with golden light. It felt like I hadn't moved in days, though it had only been a night. The lynx let out a low, rumbling sound. Not a growl, something closer to a purr. I looked up at her through the window. Her eyes were locked on her baby, her ears pricked forward, her body tense and ready to move. I swallowed hard and looked back at the cub. His eyes flickered open for the first time. Pale blue, cloudy with exhaustion and pain, but open. He let out a weak mewl that barely reached my ears. I felt tears slip down my face. I didn't wipe them away this time. I stood up slowly, cradling him against my chest, and walked to the door. My knees were stiff and my back ached from sitting so long, but I barely noticed. I unlocked the door and opened it wide. The mother lynx stood up instantly. Her ears went back, and for a moment I thought she might run. But she didn't. She crept forward, step by careful step, her golden eyes locked on mine the entire time. When she was close enough, she stopped and lifted her nose, sniffing the cub in my arms. She let out a sound so soft it was almost a whisper. I knelt down and held him out to her, my hands trembling. She leaned forward and took him gently in her mouth. Her teeth closed around the loose skin at the back of his neck, careful not to hurt him. She lifted him with ease, her muscles rippling under her spotted fur. For a moment, she just stood there, her baby dangling from her jaws, and looked at me. Really looked at me. Her eyes were wide and deep, and so heartbreakingly alive it made my chest ache. In them, I saw something I hadn't felt in years. Connection, understanding, maybe even gratitude. I whispered, "Take care of him, please." She blinked once, slow and heavy, and then turned away. She stepped off the porch and into the yard, moving with that silent grace only wild animals have. I watched her go, watched the cub's little paw twitch against her chest, watched until the trees swallowed them both. I stood there in the doorway for a long time after they were gone. The morning air was cool and smelled like wet grass and pine sap. Birds were singing somewhere deep in the trees. The world felt different, like something had shifted under my feet and nothing would ever be the same again. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I felt like I could actually breathe, like my chest wasn't weighed down with rocks, like there was still something good left in this world. I looked out at the forest, golden in the morning sun, and felt a tear slip down my cheek. But this time, it wasn't a tear of grief. It was something else, something lighter. I whispered to the empty yard, "Thank you," because I knew, deep in my bones, that today I hadn't just saved that little lynx cub. I had saved a part of myself I thought was gone forever. And as I stood there, the forest around me waking up with birdsong and wind in the trees, I knew this moment would stay with me for the rest of my life.